I never thought I would become the kind of woman who looked her husband in the eyes every single day and lied. I never thought I would build an entire life, a beautiful life with children and a home and holidays and ordinary Tuesday evenings on a foundation made entirely of deception. But that is exactly what I did. For 11 years, I deceived the kindest man I have ever known. I watched him love me without reservation. I watched him trust me without question. I watched him build his life around a woman who did not actually exist. And I told myself every single day that it was for the best, that the lies protected him, that the truth would only cause pain. I was wrong. I was so devastatingly, irreversibly wrong. My name is Victoria Hartwell, and this is the story of how I destroyed my marriage, my family, and the only man who ever truly loved me, all because I was too afraid to tell him who I really was. I met Nathan at a charity gala in downtown Chicago 11 years ago. I was 25, working as a junior account manager at a marketing firm, wearing a borrowed dress, and pretending I belonged among the wealthy donors and business leaders who filled that ballroom. I had become very good at pretending by then. Pretending was how I survived. Nathan was there representing his family's construction company, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo, clearly more at home on job sites than in ballrooms. He spilled champagne on my dress, apologized profusely, and spent the next 3 hours making me laugh harder than I had laughed in years. By the end of the night, I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. I also knew that if he ever learned the truth about my past, he would never want to see me again. So I made a choice. A terrible, selfish, unforgivable choice. I decided to become someone new, someone worthy of Nathan Hartwell, someone who had never made the mistakes I had made, someone who had never been married before, someone who didn't carry debts and secrets and shame like stones in her pockets. I created Victoria Reynolds, a woman with a clean history and a simple background, and I buried the woman I had been so deep I almost forgot she existed. Almost. The lies started small, the way lies always do. When Nathan asked about my family, I told him my parents had died in a car accident when I was 18. That part was true. But when he asked if I had any other family, I said no. I didn't tell him about my grandmother, who had raised me after my parents died, then disowned me when I married Derek Simmons at 19 against her wishes. I didn't tell him about the aunt who had reached out years later, only to discover I wanted nothing to do with the past I was desperately trying to escape. I didn't tell him about the cousins who might still remember me, who might one day appear and ask questions I couldn't answer. I sealed off my entire history like a room in a house that nobody was allowed to enter, and I decorated the rest of the house so beautifully that Nathan never thought to look for hidden doors. The lie about Derek was the biggest one. Derek Simmons was my first husband. We married when I was 19 and divorced when I was 22, after 3 years of chaos and manipulation and financial destruction that left me buried under $60,000 of debt. Derek was charming and handsome and utterly irresponsible. He convinced me to co-sign loans for business ventures that failed spectacularly. He opened credit cards in my name without my knowledge. He gambled away money we didn't have and borrowed more to cover the losses. By the time I finally found the courage to leave him, I was a shell of the person I had been, with a credit score in ruins and a mountain of debt collectors calling day and night. I spent 3 years after the divorce working multiple jobs, living in a studio apartment the size of a closet, slowly climbing out of the financial hole Derek had dug for us. By the time I met Nathan, I had paid off most of the debt, but not all of it. And I had certainly not processed the trauma of those years. I had simply locked it away and pretended it never happened. When Nathan proposed after a year of dating, I knew I should tell him the truth. I practiced the conversation in my mirror dozens of times. I would explain about Derek, about the marriage, about the debt. I would trust him to understand that I was young and foolish and had learned from my mistakes. But every time I tried to form the words, fear paralyzed me. Nathan came from a family that valued honesty above almost everything else. His parents had been married for 45 years. His sister Caroline was a family attorney who had built her career on exposing fraud and deception. His entire world was built on trust and transparency, and doing the right thing, even when it was hard. How could I tell him that the woman he loved was a fraud? How could I confess that I had been married before, that I had hidden debts, that my entire backstory was carefully constructed fiction? I convinced myself that telling him would only hurt him. I convinced myself that the past didn't matter, that only our future together was important. I convinced myself that love was enough to justify my silence. These were the lies I told myself to avoid facing the lies I was telling him. We got married in a beautiful ceremony at his family's estate outside the city. His mother Eleanor cried happy tears. His sister Caroline gave a toast about finding a woman worthy of her brother. His father, who passed away 2 years later, shook my hand and welcomed me to the family with genuine warmth. I stood at that altar, looking into Nathan's eyes, promising to love and honor and cherish him for the rest of my life, and I meant every word. But I also knew, in the darkest corner of my heart, that I was building our marriage on quicksand, that someday, somehow, the ground beneath us would give way. I just didn't expect it to take 11 years. I didn't expect to have children and a home, and an entire life that would be destroyed when the truth finally emerged. I thought I had buried my past deep enough that it would never resurface. I was wrong. The first cracks appeared 3 years into our marriage, when I discovered I still owed $7,000 from the Derek years. A debt collection agency had tracked me down, threatening legal action. I panicked. I couldn't tell Nathan. We had joint finances by then, and he would have noticed any unusual payments, any unexplained withdrawals. So I did something I am deeply ashamed of. I opened a secret credit card, slowly transferred the balance, and began paying it off in small increments, hiding the statements, deleting the emails, covering my tracks with the skill of someone who had become an expert in deception. It took me 4 years to pay off that debt. 4 years of secret stress and hidden payments and constant fear that Nathan would somehow discover what I was doing. When I finally made the last payment, I felt relief so profound I almost collapsed. I thought I was free. I thought the worst was over. I didn't know that Derek himself was about to reappear in my life and bring everything crashing down. It started with a message on social media. A simple friend request from a name I didn't recognize, attached to a profile picture that seemed familiar. I accepted it without thinking, the way we all accept requests from strangers who might be old classmates or distant connections. Within minutes, another message arrived. Hello, Victoria. Or should I say, hello, Mrs. Hartwell. It's been a long time. My blood ran cold. I knew before I even clicked on the profile who it was. Derek had found me. Derek, who I had spent years hiding from. Derek, who knew every secret I had worked so desperately to bury. Derek, who had destroyed my life once and was about to do it again. His messages started casually, almost friendly. He said he had changed, that he was in a better place now, that he just wanted to reconnect with an old friend. I didn't believe him for a second, but I didn't know how to make him go away without risking exposure. So I responded cautiously, trying to assess what he wanted, how much he knew, whether there was any way to manage the situation without Nathan finding out. The conversations escalated slowly. Derek mentioned that he had seen articles about Nathan's company, about our beautiful home, about the charity work we did together. He mentioned that he had fallen on hard times, that life hadn't been as kind to him as it had been to me. He mentioned almost casually that he wondered what Nathan would think if he knew the truth about his wife's past. The implication was clear. Derek wanted money, and if I didn't give it to him, he would tell Nathan everything. I should have confessed right then. I should have gone to Nathan, told him everything, and faced the consequences. But I was terrified. We had 2 children by then, Ethan, who was 5, and Sophie, who was 2. We had a life I loved, a marriage I cherished, a future I couldn't imagine losing. I told myself I could handle Derek. I told myself I could make him go away with a single payment, that he would take the money and disappear, and I would never have to think about him again. So I withdrew $5,000 from a savings account I had kept hidden, one I had started years ago for emergencies exactly like this, and I met Derek at a coffee shop on the other side of the city. He looked older, worn down by years of bad decisions, but his smile was the same, charming and dangerous. He took the money with a theatrical display of gratitude, promised this would be the last time, and walked out of the coffee shop. I actually believed him. I actually thought it was over. 3 months later, he was back. He needed more. His circumstances had changed. $10,000 this time, and then he would be gone for good. I paid him, draining my secret savings, hating myself more with every dollar. 3 months after that, he was back again. $15,000. I didn't have it. I had to open another secret credit card, take out a cash advance, begin another cycle of hidden payments and desperate lies. Derek had become a parasite attached to my life, feeding on my fear and my secrets, and I had no idea how to remove him without destroying everything I had built. The payments continued for 2 years. 2 years of living in constant terror. 2 years of secret meetings and hidden transactions and elaborate lies to explain my stress and distraction. Nathan noticed something was wrong. Of course he did. He asked if I was feeling well, if work was overwhelming me, if there was anything he could do to help. I lied to his face every time, inventing work stress, health concerns, anything to explain the darkness that was consuming me from the inside out. My best friend Leah began to notice too. We had known each other since college, long before Derek, long before Nathan, and she could read me better than anyone. She asked, gently at first and then more directly, what was really going on. I wanted to tell her. God, I wanted to tell someone. The weight of carrying all these secrets alone was crushing me. But Leah was also close with Nathan. They had become friends over the years, part of the same social circle, and I was terrified that if I told her the truth, she would feel obligated to tell him. So I lied to her too, adding another layer of deception to the towering structure of falsehoods I had built. I was disappearing under the weight of my own lies, and I couldn't see any way out. Caroline was the first one to see through me. Nathan's sister had never quite warmed to me the way the rest of the family had. She was polite, even friendly, but there was always something watchful in her eyes, something that suggested she was waiting for me to make a mistake. As a family attorney, she had developed instincts for deception, and I always felt like she could see past my carefully constructed facade. 5 years into my marriage, she mentioned casually at a family dinner that she had been doing some genealogy research, tracing the Hartwell family tree, and asked if I might want her to look into my family as well. The question seemed innocent, but the way she looked at me when she asked it made my stomach drop. I declined as gracefully as I could, claiming I had already done that research years ago, and changed the subject. But I could feel her suspicion like a weight on my shoulders, and I knew that if anyone was going to expose my lies, it would be Caroline. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon in September, 3 years ago. Nathan called me at work, his voice strange, and asked me to come home early. Something was wrong. I could hear it in his tone, in the careful way he chose his words. When I arrived at our house, he was sitting at the kitchen table with a folder in front of him. Caroline was there too, standing by the window, her expression unreadable, and sitting across from Nathan, looking entirely too pleased with himself, was Derek. My entire body went cold. I knew in that moment that my life as I knew it was over. Derek had gotten tired of the small payments. He had decided to go directly to Nathan, to expose everything, to watch my world collapse while he collected whatever reward he thought my husband might pay to make him go away. But Derek had miscalculated. He didn't understand the kind of man Nathan was. He didn't understand that Nathan would never negotiate with someone who had exploited his wife, no matter how angry he was at the deception. The next hour was the worst of my life. Derek laid out everything, every detail of our marriage, every lie I had told, every payment I had made over the years. He had documentation, records, proof that I had been deceiving Nathan for over a decade. He presented it with the smugness of someone who thought he was holding all the cards, someone who expected Nathan to turn on me completely and hand over money to make the problem go away. But Nathan just sat there, his face like stone, listening without interruption. When Derek finally finished, expecting some kind of explosion or negotiation, Nathan simply looked at him and said 3 words. "Get out now." Derek protested, threatened to go public, threatened to contact the media, threatened all the things that desperate men threaten when their plans fall apart. Caroline stepped forward then, her attorney's training fully engaged, and informed Derek that everything he had done constituted extortion and blackmail, that she had documented this entire conversation, and that if he didn't leave immediately and never contact this family again, she would personally ensure he spent the next several years in prison. Derek left. He practically ran, and then Nathan looked at me. I will never forget that look as long as I live. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was something worse. It was confusion and hurt and disbelief. The expression of a man whose entire reality had just been shattered. He asked me if it was true. All of it. I couldn't lie anymore. I was so tired of lying. So I told him everything. I told him about Derek, about our marriage, about the debt, about my fabricated history, about the years of secret payments, about the fear that had driven every decision I had made since the day we met. I told him that I loved him more than I had ever loved anyone, that our children were the greatest joy of my life, that I had built these lies not to hurt him, but because I was terrified of losing him. I begged him to understand. I begged him to forgive me. I begged him to see past the deception to the real love that had always been underneath it. Nathan listened without interrupting, just as he had listened to Derek. When I finally stopped talking, tears streaming down my face, he stood up slowly and left the room without saying a word. That silence was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The days that followed were a kind of purgatory. Nathan moved into the guest room. He continued to be present for our children, maintaining routines and normalcy for Ethan and Sophie, but he barely looked at me. Caroline called several times, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Leah came over when she heard something was wrong, and I finally told her everything, sobbing into her shoulder, confessing the years of secrets I had kept from everyone. She held me and let me cry, but I could see the hurt in her eyes, too. The realization that I had lied to her for over a decade. The loneliness of that time was suffocating. I had spent years building walls to protect myself, and now those walls had become my prison. Everyone I loved was on the other side, and I had no idea how to reach them. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Nathan finally sat down with me to talk. His face was tired. aged by the stress of discovering that his entire marriage was built on lies. He told me he had spoken with a therapist, with his family, with trusted friends, trying to make sense of what had happened. He told me he still loved me, that he couldn't simply turn off 11 years of partnership and parenthood. But he also told me that he didn't know if he could ever trust me again. Trust, he said, was not like love. Love could survive betrayal. Trust might not. He said he needed time to figure out if there was anything worth saving. He said he wanted me to find my own therapist, to start doing the work of understanding why I had chosen deception over honesty at every possible turn. He said that if there was any chance of rebuilding our marriage, it would require complete transparency from this point forward. No more secrets, no more lies, no matter how painful the truth might be. I agreed to everything. I would have agreed to anything. The months that followed were the hardest work I have ever done. I started therapy twice a week, digging into the fears and insecurities that had driven my behavior. I confronted the trauma of my first marriage, the shame I had carried for so long, the belief that I was fundamentally unworthy of love, and had to construct a false self to earn it. I reached out to family members I had cut off years ago, including my aunt, who was shocked to hear from me but willing to reconnect. I began the slow, painful process of becoming a person I didn't have to hide. Nathan and I started couples counseling, sessions that often devolved into arguments and tears, but occasionally produced moments of genuine connection. He asked questions about my past, and I answered them honestly, no matter how much it hurt. I showed him documentation of every hidden payment, every secret account, every lie I could remember telling. I exposed myself completely, leaving no corner of my life in shadow, trusting that transparency was the only path back to his heart. It took 2 years before Nathan said he was ready to try to move forward. 2 years of therapy and conversations and rebuilding trust, one honest moment at a time. Our marriage will never be what it was. We both know that. The easy trust we once shared is gone forever, replaced by something more fragile, something that requires constant attention and care. Some days I catch Nathan looking at me with doubt in his eyes, wondering if there are still secrets I haven't revealed, still lies I'm too afraid to tell. I understand that doubt. I caused it, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to prove that the woman he's married to now is finally, truly real. Caroline and I have developed an unexpected relationship. After everything came out, I expected her to push Nathan toward divorce, to see me as the fraud she had always suspected I was. Instead, she sat down with me one afternoon, just the two of us, and told me something I will never forget. She said that everyone has things they're ashamed of, that the measure of a person isn't the mistakes they've made, but how they face those mistakes when they're exposed. She said she had watched me in the months since the truth came out, and she saw someone who was genuinely trying to change, genuinely committed to doing better. She said that was enough for her, that she would support whatever decision Nathan made, but that she no longer saw me as the enemy. Her acceptance meant more to me than I could ever express. My children are older now. Ethan is 11. Sophie is 8. They know something happened to their parents' marriage, though we've protected them from the details. Someday, when they're old enough, I will tell them the truth about who I was and what I did. I will tell them that I made terrible choices out of fear and shame. I will tell them that lies, no matter how well-intentioned, always cause more damage than the truths they're trying to hide. I will tell them that their father's willingness to forgive, even partially, was the greatest gift I have ever received, and that I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it. I hope they will learn from my mistakes. I hope they will choose honesty, even when it's hard, even when the truth is painful, even when deception seems like the easier path. Because it never is. It never, ever is. I think about Derek sometimes. I learned through mutual contacts that he was eventually arrested for running a similar extortion scheme on someone else, someone who wasn't as forgiving as Nathan. He's serving time now, facing the consequences of a lifetime of manipulation and greed. Part of me feels something like pity for him. He was a product of his own damage, his own fears, his own inability to face life honestly. But mostly, I feel nothing. He's a chapter of my life that's finally, completely closed. The guilt has never fully left me. I don't think it ever will. Even now, 3 years after everything collapsed, I still wake sometimes in the middle of the night, heart racing, certain that Nathan has discovered yet another lie I've forgotten to confess. I still flinch when he asks me unexpected questions, my first instinct still to construct a comfortable fiction rather than face an uncomfortable truth. I fight that instinct every single day. I will probably fight it for the rest of my life. That's the price of the person I chose to be for so long. The habits of deception don't disappear overnight. They have to be overcome, consciously, repeatedly, every time the temptation arises. If you're listening to this, and you recognize something of yourself in my story, if you're keeping secrets from someone you love, if you've built parts of your life on foundations of lies, please hear me. The collapse is coming. Maybe not today, maybe not next year, but it's coming. And when it arrives, it will destroy far more than the truth ever would have. The people who love you deserve to know who you really are. They deserve the chance to love the real you, not the fiction you've constructed to seem worthy of their love. And you deserve to be loved for who you actually are. Flaws and mistakes, and shameful history included. That's the only love that's real. That's the only love that can actually save you. I deceived my husband for 11 years, and when everything collapsed, I lost his trust, my integrity, and the easy happiness I had taken for granted. I nearly lost my marriage, my children's stability, and my own sanity. The only thing that saved me was Nathan's extraordinary capacity for forgiveness and my own desperate willingness to finally tell the truth. I am still rebuilding. I will be rebuilding for the rest of my life. But at least now I'm building on solid ground. At least now the woman Nathan sees is the woman I actually am. That's worth everything I lost. That's worth every painful moment of the collapse. My name is Victoria Hartwell, and I am no longer the woman who hides. I am no longer the woman who lies. I am damaged and scarred and forever marked by my choices. But I am also, finally, truly honest. And that honesty, hard-won and costly as it was, is the greatest gift I have ever given myself. The guilt never fully leaves. The consequences never fully disappear. But the truth, however painful, has set me free.